Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Chris and Marty Show. Today we're going to talk about our experiences over this past weekend. Chris went to DC and I went to NMMI's homecoming. After that, we're going to give our definitions of what a leader is, and then we're going to relate that to political leadership landscape that we see today. So, Chris?
So in DC, this past weekend was really interesting. We were able to meet a lot of politicians that especially our congressional delegation here in New Mexico. And what the conference was about overall was Israeli-Palestinian relations and the conflict that's going on. We were able to meet a lot of people from across the country, especially college Democrats in our hostel. We spent some time with two fellas from Stanford, so that obviously made me feel a little inferior in some ways, but it was nice because we were able to communicate with them, talk to them about a lot of things, and we all just enjoyed the time that we spent together as somewhat of a little college Democrat family. So that was good. And how was things over there at NIMI?
Oh, well, it was exciting, honestly. It was kind of good to go back, different to look at it from an alumni aspect. I was able to catch up with other alums, TLAs, the superintendent, dean, commandant, and a bunch of cadets, which was a really good experience, and I was kind of happy I went back.
Good.
So now we're going to move into our definition of what makes a good leader. So what do you got for us, Chris?
Well, I've always tried to predicate the basis for my definition of leadership around a French Enlightenment term, and that term is noblesse oblige, that the people of nobility are obligated to those less fortunate, and even though, we don't have kings and queens and viscounts and whatever the hell, else is out there, like titles and whatnot, people of nobility, in my view, are people of noble character. And, to put my own little twist on that, the people who act nobly towards those who are subordinate to them or have more advantages and want to be able to help others is a part of what I think a good leadership definition would be. So, what about you?
Well, a big thing along with what you said, obviously communication and stuff like that is vitally important, but a big thing for me and something that I always preach, it's about the people. First and foremost, regardless of where you're a leader at, it's always about the people. And I think it's a perfect correlation in terms of politicians. They get elected and they go to their state legislature or to Congress or the White House, whatever the case might be. They often forget that it was their constituents that put them in those places.
Amen.
And, I think they often forget of where they come from. Going to NMMI for both of us, I had the experience of being demoted, and it was probably the best experience that has happened to me. I was humbled, and I kind of remembered where I came from. I remember what it was like to be at that bottom level, just another guy at the formation. And I think it's kind of time we start seeing a new era of political leaders that remember who put them there and kind of vouch more for their constituents as opposed to whatever they may be getting sold out to, or they get caught up in this identity political game and they kind of forget what it's like to be not only an elected official, but in essence they are a leader of their district, of their state,
Yes.
and in some cases of the nation.
Right.
So now, as we move into political leadership, we kind of want to talk about the leaders of the party. For the Republicans, we're going to talk about the president, Donald Trump, and then we're going to talk about the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. So when it comes to Trump, he's a very divisive person. I think he's a good Republican leader. And when I say that is he's able to kind of unify in certain respects the GOP. He has a 95% approval rating in the party. However, where he fails to unify the country is he kind of alienates Democrats in a sense. And I think it takes a special kind of person to kind of look and see his point of view. There's very few Democrats that kind of start looking at him and saying, okay, this is someone I can get behind. As opposed to where, generally speaking, presidential candidates not only go for their base, they try to broaden their sphere of influence.
Catch-all, yeah.
Exactly. So what are your thoughts on President Trump?
Well, as a person who has basically ignited the entire populist brand of the right, he is touching on something that's very, very important. The things that all of the Democratic, folks have alienated in certain ways. Being tough on immigration was a very Democratic policy move and policy interest. Talking about how free trade has been affecting a lot of people, affecting people's jobs and things like that. And then talking about, just foreign policy and non-interventionism. These three things I think were enough to broaden his catch-all as a populist. Okay, his brand of leadership is obviously very, personified by him in terms of being a strong man, being a tough guy, being very aggressive, especially with the rhetoric that he shares with folks. And while I think that these are all grand ways to start a movement, I think when that gets translated to the national sphere of things, it gets difficult because when he talks to his opponents the way he does, he's always leaving out a huge chunk of people that are not in his brand right now, not in the populist right movement. And I think, when we look at some people on the left who were, that agree with him on certain things, let's look at Tulsi Gabbard for one. She has a non-interventionist platform.
Right.
A long-term platform, stuff like that. Bernie is very in favor of tariffs. That's why he never mentions, any of the detriments happening right now with farmers losing their, losing their contracts and being able to sell overseas and stuff like that. There is an unspoken middle ground. There really is, and nobody talks about it. Tucker Carlson, from the right wing, talks about these things too. About how all of these old order ways of doing things from the Democratic and Republican establishment, presidents and officials of the past, are affecting us in a way that is very, very intricate. It's specific. It speaks volumes to how there's such a middle ground between the left populists and the right populists that nobody's talking about. And so I think if he taps into that, he could actually get himself a little bit more of credit when it comes to his leadership style. But I don't think he taps into it that much because he's focused on bashing, and he's focused on demonizing the other side, that it gets lost in translation when you really see the common ground, the invisible common ground between left and right.
Awesome. So now, as we move on to Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, in my opinion, she's very different, I guess, in the sense, I was looking at a national poll, and she was polling as one of the least favorite politicians in general, both GOP and the Democratic side. And she has such low approval rating numbers, and I don't think she's a very good unifying speaker in a sense. I know that when she was voted in as Speaker of the House, that she would promise to only do one term as it. So I think the Democrats have the wrong person kind of unifying and speaking on their behalf at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. I think when it comes to Nancy Pelosi, she's actually going through right now what the Republicans were dealing with in the House when John Boehner had to deal with the Tea Party folks, right? Who we'd probably consider close to Trump supporters today, right? These are the people that were talking about all the hot button issues that President Trump was talking about. When it comes to Nancy Pelosi, she has to deal with the Democratic Socialist folks, these more progressive folks coming in that are going to ruin her brand of being somewhat of a liberal moderate in the party. So if she is the wrong person, I can probably agree to that to some extent. I think as a legislator, she still kind of takes some of the older ideas of like Speaker Tip O'Neill during the Reagan idea. She rewards loyalty. She has this thing where she, sort of gives junior officer positions to make the loyal people to her brand of the party a little, elevate their status in certain ways. But if she's the wrong person, I think it's because she's too Diet Coke for some of these Democratic Socialist types. She's not far left enough, I think, in my view.
And I'm going to kind of speak bad about both people now. And I think it's a failure on both President Trump's side and Speaker Pelosi's. They tend to point at each other. It's always their fault. They're both the devil in these cases, and they further divide us as a country in a sense. Because if you turn on the news, you see Trump walking out of a meeting with congressional leadership, or you see Pelosi getting up and screaming, and so on and so forth. That this is not conducive to creating a better atmosphere at the national level.
It's all about tit for tat.
Exactly.
If we get a win, then somebody else needs to get a win. The other side needs to get a win.
Right.
If we lose, you're going to have to lose too.
Right.
So being locked in this stalemate is not healthy for the country, I think, because I think that ordinary people like us, I feel like the divisiveness is overplayed. Coming from New Mexico, maybe it might be a little bit different because I think there's a stronger synthesis between Republicans and Democrats in a state like this with a huge Hispanic population, with being an oil and gas state. But I think it really is overplayed. And I think if the media keeps on showing this type of narrative playing out between Trump and Pelosi, then it's only going to fan the flames even further.
Yeah, we kind of saw that the other last week, I believe, when Ellen DeGeneres was with former President Bush. They were both kind of attacked on that premise. But moving on into what I wanted to come up with real quick was that the ISIS leader al-Baghdadi was actually killed recently, and I kind of wanted to compare how Trump's remarks related to Osama bin Laden's death in 2011, with President Obama. I wanted to read real quick from one of President Trump's remarks here. He died after running into a dead-end tunnel. He was whimpering and crying and screaming all the way. So how does this kind of fit in with something that Obama said in 2011?
Well, the way that President Obama had talked about the terrorist Osama bin Laden being killed, and talked about the entire process and the operation being conducted by the SEAL Team 6 folks. It was very, you look at how he explains things, very academic, very, utilized a lot of words that were very choice words, and, well thought out and eloquent. And then now most recently with Trump, obviously it's he was a baby and he cried and all that type of stuff. It's just a part of the president's personality at the time. The rhetoric of President Trump talking like that about a terrorist leader being killed. While I would not consider it professional, it's also very good politically. Obviously, he's trying to excite his base. He got elected on the premise that he would not stand for any political correctness and can say whatever he wants, and that's good politically for him. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's not professional. And the way that you conduct yourself at the international level and talking about serious issues like this, with the Trump way of communicating, it's obviously, we're way past an orthodoxy of the personas of President Obama, President Bush, President Clinton. We're way past that.
Right. And it has how this relates to leadership, it's, in my opinion, it was kind of wrong. I think it's kind of funny the way President Trump spoke about al-Baghdadi, but at the same time, was it the right thing to do? In my opinion, not necessarily. President Trump is a world leader. Whether he wants to think it or not, or whatever the case might be, he is a world leader, and he should have spoken like such, because he's not only addressing the American people at this point, he's not only addressing his base, he's speaking to the world. Everyone's going to know about the Kurds, Turkey, everyone. So I really think he should have been a little more academic in a sense, like you said, how President Obama was and how he approached the situation.
Yeah. At the end of the day, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is dead.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great thing. So now the next segment we really want to touch on is up-and-comers for the GOP and the Democratic Party. For the GOP, we have Representative Dan Crenshaw from Texas and Nikki Haley. She was the former UN ambassador for the Trump administration and the former governor of South Carolina, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for the Democratic side, we have?
For the Democratic side, I think the new up-and-comers that are really going to shape the overall platform and shape the way of thinking of Democrats are going to be Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard. When you look at these folks, they are what I would consider populist in a way too. They came out from nowhere, right? And they surround and predicate their entire campaigns based upon something they feel is important that would relate to the interests of ordinary Americans, which is what populism is. Coming from the left, though, I think these two have some sort of a level-headedness that matches sort of the Dan Crenshaws and Nikki Haley's of the Republican Party. If you see how Andrew Yang communicates with conservatives, he's on the Ben Shapiro show, he's always on Tucker Carlson, as Tulsi Gabbard was on Tucker Carlson at one time. They have a unique way of communicating with the opposition that has nothing to do with a tit for tat type of attitude that we might see from current Democratic leadership.
For Dan Crenshaw, he's been getting a lot of media attention as well. He kind of ran for Texas 2nd District this past election cycle, and he kind of raised the GOP in a sense. It was kind of all based off of Trump and what he was doing and stuff like that. And now that he's kind of in the picture, I think it not only allows for kind of ease of mind for Republicans, because now we know there's going to be an up-and-comer to kind of take the mantle of Trump. And that's not to say that Dan Crenshaw is kind of Trump's brand of conservatism.
I don't think so. I think he's very moderate.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that when he looks at issues like gun control and thinking about these red flag laws, that's obviously going to be of some interest to Democrats, by and large. And he has, I think, his way of dealing and communicating with folks. We were just with our congresswoman from down here in CD2 of New Mexico, and she told us that they communicate often. They obviously disagree on things, but being able to have that dialogue, I mean, if you can hook somebody in from the opposition and talk to them about things, that's obviously the best first step on how we're going to unify the country.
Absolutely, and since he is a moderate, he does appeal to more people. He's not, the far right or that far left. He's going to hit the center part of the country, right, which is kind of missing, and I think it's a good stepping stone. And secondly, he was a Navy SEAL. That appeals to a lot of people. He's seen as that hero, that military hero, which a lot of people like. And then we kind of look at Nikki Haley. She drew a lot of attention when she was the UN ambassador, and I do believe she did a very good job until she resigned in 2018. Mm-hmm. But I do think that in my opinion, she's a little more old school conservative. So I kind of think that she kind of gets the older folks and whatnot, but I still believe that she's a little better well-spoken, even more so than the president, and she's still one of those people that she's at the edge where she can still move up on that political ladder.
When we look at the both of them, I think that after this Trump era is finished, the populist movement is going to start to maybe middle itself out. I hope. That's what I hope. And looking at, right after Trump, who's next? He's already such a popular figure within the Republican Party that when we look at up-and-comers, we're thinking of people that are doing something different from what he's doing, because that's all they can hold on to. So I hope to see that maybe by the time they decide to run for higher office, that we'll look at how they operate with the movement, and hopefully they're able to energize them in a way that's just as effective as Trump's. I mean, obviously I ain't praying for it, but let's just be somewhat optimistic. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we just wanted to thank you again for tuning in to the Chris and Marty Show. Please like and share, and we appreciate your support. Thank you. Have a good day.